Hello, everyone, and welcome to Community Meeting. Today, we're going to start off. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the upcoming election and what the timeline for outcomes may be, and how we'll tend to our community through this period that we have ahead following the election. So what to expect? Well, the results from the election may be delayed more than any election in the past, and here's why. First, we're anticipating a record number of mail-in ballots. 50 to 70% of ballots may be mailed in this election as compared to 23% in 2016. Why is that? Well, there are voters who are concerned about the coronavirus, and so in order to avoid polling places, they've requested that their ballots be mailed to them, and then they're sending them back in, or they're placing them into voting boxes in their towns. And then comes the step of the counting. So states are responsible for running elections, and the procedures for counting ballots actually vary state by state, sometimes even county by county. Ballots have to be collected, counted, verified, and then have this official step that they call certification, which makes them official. And that has to be done by a given deadline. Some states don't even allow the counting of mail-in ballots to begin until election day. So imagine that state is having all its elections, and then it turns to the huge supply of mail-in ballots to start work counting those. And the deadlines for finishing the job of an election, the certification deadline, that differs state by state. So for example, Pennsylvania's deadline is November 11th, but Texas's deadline is December 3rd. All states will be done with their counting, their collecting, and their certifying by December 8th. And then the Electoral College will meet on December 14th to officially, formally cast votes for the presidency. If a count is contested within a state, a lawsuit may be filed by one political party or candidate or campaign in a state court. And the state court's decisions can be appealed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, in the presidential campaign of George W. Bush versus Al Gore, there was a recount in Florida due to issues with the ballots. Then the recount was challenged in a lawsuit that was reviewed by lower courts until the Florida State Supreme Court made a decision. Then a campaign appealed the Florida State Supreme Court's decision, and eventually the U.S. Supreme Court decided it finally on December 11th. Wonderfully, our History Department Chair, Mr. Tanner Reed, is going to give us an update next week on where we are as a nation in this whole process of counting and certifying. We can be very proud that we belong to a very old democracy. And when we hear that the U.S. is a nation of laws, we might wonder what that means. Well, what it means is that in cases of uncertainty, the courts decide, not the army, not the police, but the courts. And the judges make decisions based upon both precedent, cases that have been decided in the past, and also laws or legal statutes, as they're sometimes called. So we want to remember that democracy takes patience. If you want fast decisions, then dictatorship is your favorite form of government. But with democracy, we are patient. It takes time to follow the laws in the election process, and democracy moves slowly in governing too. When democracy is functioning well, it's deliberative and it involves compromise from multiple sides. So we're going to have faith in the care and the commitment of local election officials, and we won't jump to conclusions, because healthy patriotism sometimes means having patience and assuming the best until proven otherwise. So what does that mean for Derryfield? Well, the outside world, the country outside of Derryfield, may be contentious in the weeks ahead. People may be testy, oppositional, they may be angry, they may say hateful things about each other. But at Derryfield, we craft our community ourselves. And we can't control how people in the outside world may behave, but here we're going to be extra caring of one another through this period. Derryfield is a learning community, and so we hold two values at the same time: free speech and also respect and care for each person. So opinions or comments that disparage a person's gender, race, ethnicity, religion, identity, they aren't allowed, because if a student feels disrespected or diminished, then that student can't fully express themselves, can they? They can't be free to exercise their free speech and their free thought. Freedom of speech and freedom of thought for all requires an inclusive community where all are equally valued and confident that they'll be respected. So racist, sexist, homophobic, anti-religious, or other statements we would see as unreasonable behavior because they deny the liberty and the equality of some of our students. So those kinds of comments won't be entertained in Derryfield classrooms or on campus. That being said, we know that we will make mistakes and sometimes we will hurt each other, and it will matter whether the comments were intentional or unintentional. But overall, we're going to work so hard to be a community of care. So how will we interact? Well, we'll interact in talking after the election without gloating that our candidate or our party was successful. And we'll engage civilly with each other and enjoy debate and discussion. Or we can say, no thanks, I don't feel like talking about that today. We're going to speak from facts and we're going to cite valid sources because that's what good scholars do. And we're going to relish intellectual conversations with each other about government and politics. That's one of the wonderful things about being a member of a learning institution. So what will it look like when we're doing that? Well, we're going to assume positive intent in the other person. We're going to listen and we're going to seek to understand the other person's opinion, the other person's view, especially if it's different from our own. We're going to challenge ideas and arguments, but not people. That's a real skill. That's a high-level intellectual skill, to not make it personal, but focus on the ideas, the facts, the argument. And we're going to go into our conversations expecting to learn from each other, humble that we don't know everything, and knowing that we don't have to agree in the middle of the conversation or at the end. And that's in many ways, that's part of what makes it so interesting. Knowing that our conversation and our atmosphere is going to be respectful for everyone, we can really relish that intellectual dialogue that we're going to have, whether it's in class or study hall or lunch or wherever it is, on the bus, wherever. But wherever you are, those same high standards of being a member of this community apply. Some helpful reminders about how to have conversations like this, especially with people who may or may not agree with you, are in our classrooms, and they look like this. Ms. Schutz was wonderful to have these printed up, and you can see posters like this all around school right now, which is terrific. So let's take our mindful minute now and reflect upon how will I be a civilly engaged, open to change, and learner in this community in the month ahead. So let's take a moment. Thanks.